Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Spark. So, this is actually the last video for August, and it's the last piece I'm going to do with the inspiration of the salmon. And I'll be honest, I'd kind of spent all my inspiration and wasn't really sure what I was going to do when I sat down to do this. So, I was thinking about the colors and the textures of the fish scales of the salmon that have spots. And I just thought I was going to keep it pretty simple. I thought it was going to be abstract. And as you'll see, if you keep watching, it's not abstract. But thinking about the salmon that spawn upstream, so currents and water and movement, that's the kind of stuff that was in my head. And I didn't really want this green smeared everywhere. I wanted it kind of on the lower portion of the spread, but I was just kind of in the zone smearing paint around, and there you go. So I just kept smearing and thought I would respond to things as they start to work out. Sometimes that blank page is the hardest part to start, and yeah, I mean, that kind of rhymes. Just smearing some paint on helps. Gives me a chance to sit also and to maybe look through my collage paper or look and see if there are any images, while the paint dries, right? So there's kind of a pause there. I specifically have not sped up any parts of this video. I cut out sections that were, dead air if I was sitting there thinking, but so often I speed up the video that I thought this would be a nice one to show you the whole process kind of in real time. Yes, there were pauses when I turned off the camera. Yes, I did film this in 3 segments and then put them all together. But those pauses were, a minute or 2 each. A pause to let the dog outside, a pause to drink some water. So it wasn't as if this unfolded over the course of an entire day or a couple days. I just wanted to explain that since it might give you a bit more insight into my process as I'm working. Right now, it's all a bit uniform. There's that cream, that Titan buff, and that's what I'm adding more of right now. And there was an olive green. That was paint from Jerry's, their kind of studio house brand. And as I was putting this extra Titan buff on, I started to get kind of some swoops. There we go, that swoop that felt like the current and felt like the water to me. And so that started to percolate a few ideas in my head. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you know that I tend to work in cool colors and jewel tones. And so this kind of red-orange paper was quite a departure for me. It was a piece of a cardstock from, a big cardstock pad. It actually has little small spots on it. But I just cut out a few abstract fish shapes. Some of the reference photos that I had on my table showed that really red color of the salmon with the black spots on it. And so I cut them all out. They were the same and trimmed them down so there'd be some variety there. And just thought that, yeah, I know they're not all going upstream, but just thought that they would be my stand-in for my salmon. The shapes were so sharp and so precise, and I love layering, so a little more of that Titan buff, and I want to try and layer them into the page a little bit. Not obscure them totally. I didn't want to go with like a heavy gesso to do this smear over top, but I wanted something, it's already on the page, right? So it blends them in to a degree without completely obliterating the red color or their forms. At this point, I kind of need to pause and let things dry before I start the next layer. And it was time for some gesso. This was the very last bit in my jar of gesso, and it was, I mean, thick like spackle. So it was quite a task to get this spread out on the page. But I wanted to brighten some areas and I wanted to get a little texture in there. So this paint layer that I want to do, I'm using a really ratty old fan brush, and I'm using it dry because I like the texture brush stroke that I get from that. Nice and broken up, has some, like, I don't know how to describe it. It just is, well, it's a dry brush. And so this maybe was a little darker than I had in my head. So I'm going to come into it with another color as well. But because the placement of the fishes, I wanted to have that flow continue and have that evoke water and, you know, spawning, swimming upstream. Could I have mixed different colors? Sure. But one of the reasons why I love the Dick Blick set I have of acrylic paints is that it was like a set of 24 tubes and there are so many colors already mixed and it keeps me in the flow a little bit if I just need to grab something that is close. Of course, there are times when I mix custom colors when there's something specific that I want. But in this case, it was nice to have colors on hand. So this kind of stencil and mask combo I don't use very often and I want to play with it more. It is, of course, by the fabulous Stencil Girl products. I cannot recommend them enough. And I'm using I'm using two golden colors. One is the Titan Green Buff, and then the other, as you can see, is kind of an aqua color. Because there was Titan Buff on the original spread with that olive green, it was really close to the Titan Green Buff color. So adding a little aqua just to differentiate and and give me some of those circles, both for bubbles, both for river rock, both for the spots on a salmon, the scales on a salmon. Just I wanted to work with that kind of circular element in the pieces. It's pretty subtle. It doesn't show a lot on camera, but it was a really nice layering element. So on this side, some of that blue, some of the Payne's gray as well, still wet. And so I am getting some smearing, which is great. I didn't think that through to imagine that happening, but I love it. And I'll just go back in and place that kind of swoosh. Yeah, a little detail on the fish, breaking up that red, but also, adding some texture, adding some layer, adding some detail. I want to use this stencil somewhere, and I'm not sure where. I like it as both a seaweed reference, but also as a current and a flow reference. So I set that aside for now, and I did pick up this kind of ammonite stamp. It's a foam stamp, but I'm using it here with dark blue archival ink. Sorry for the camera shaking. That does happen when I kind of stamp pretty robustly. I just love a spiral element, and this stamp is beautiful. So I do use it a lot. I admit that, but I like it. And I like the way it is a repeat motif with the painted kind of swirl swoosh. Then we've got the spiral of the ammonite. Sorry, fishing around for a paintbrush. I mean, I was stenciling a lot, and it's nice to just play and have some marks in there that you've made. This was completely spontaneous and just kind of scribbly. Um, but fluid. In case you hadn't gathered, I am doing this voiceover after the fact. I had some videos on that I was watching while I was working, so of course I took that audio out to not infringe on other YouTubers' copyright, to not get a strike from YouTube. But um, sometimes it's nice to look back at the piece after anyway, and not only tell you what I physically did, but why I did it. Some splattering with white acrylic ink. I did have my coffee cup placed far enough away that I did not get splatters in my coffee. That is a constant concern. I think I'm grabbing some sprays next. Again, keep your coffee cup far away from that. This one was a Payne's Gray watercolor, just diluted and in a bottle. And I think the next one I'm going to grab is a Ranger Tim Holtz distress ink, maybe like in a pale blue, like a sea glass, a powdery blue, something like that. Things got a little wet over here on the right side. I could have left it alone. There was some nice swirling where the wet and wet was mixing from the watercolor and the distress inks. But I was on a roll and I wanted to keep working, so um, blotting it dry. The green squiggles on the bottom have worked, but I still want to use this stencil. If I don't put the lid on that white ink, I will knock it over and spill it all over the table, and then probably all over, my iPad. So that's the kind of thing that I often edit out, but in this one I did want to keep it in real time. Mostly real time. Like I said, I'd cut out dead space. Um, or if there was too much shuffling around on the table where it was just views of my arms reaching for things. But you're seeing all of the actual working time without being sped up at all. So the video runs almost 18 minutes. The whole process with the pauses probably took half an hour. So half an hour for this spread, start to finish. So while I did edit it, giving you that kind of behind the scenes transparency, I did not take out very much. At this point, I'm thinking it's done, yet I'm also thinking that it needs some tiny accent, some extra focal aside from the fish. I'm happy with the composition of the fish and the swirl. I think they balance each other out nicely. But I went to this green box that you see off camera to see what magazine text, what found words that I had. And they don't often have to do with fish, but I thought, maybe determination or, something about the journey of the salmon, that battle that it fights to swim upstream. But I found this Path from the Ocean quote, and it was perfect. And so that's what we're going with. All in all, I'm really happy with the way that this spread turned out. This is not a topic that I really would have. Following a path, yes. Ocean themes, yes. But fish, and specifically red salmon, isn't something that I normally would have picked. And that's one thing I like about these monthly challenges where I pick an animal and have a motif to work with. It does give me a cause to stretch a little and to do something otherwise I may not have, thought to do. That's the joy to me of art journaling, is doing something different, changing the page, doing something completely different again. So thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next week for another episode of Weekly Spark. And as always, I invite you to like and subscribe. Thanks again. Bye-bye.